And welcome to the first videocast from WeTalkIsrael.org. And I guess I'm going to explain who I am, why I'm doing this. I'm going to just put that down a bit. There you go. Better. This is lo-fi, ladies and gentlemen. This is on my laptop. I'm in my friend's house in the UK. I've been living in Israel for the last 9 months. I'm actually in Camden, so if you can hear some residual Camden noise, it's Saturday night, very late, and my name is David Yitzchak. I am using my Hebrew name. Jews, I am a Jew, by the way. Just like to, let's lay that out, lay the cards on the table. I'm a Jew. You can't see my horns, they're just under here. They're actually under there, that was my fingers, but I have got horns, of course, because I'm a Jew. And in my spare time, I like to count up the money, counting up the money, counting up the money, counting up the money. That's what I do as a Jew, obviously. But other than that, I used to be in the music industry, and I am from time to time. I moved to Israel because, let's say this. I was concerned about what's going on there. I'm a Jew. Let's say this. The Jews are a tribe. Maybe you've not heard them described as that, but we're a tribe. Let me own the fact that I'm a Jew. We are a tribe. And the other night I was with a friend of mine who said to me, "What is going on with Israel? What's going on?" And I said to him, "Mate, Rich, let me tell you what's going on, Rich." He's not a Jew. Very, very good person. Because he's not a Jew. I just said, "Rich, let me tell you what's going on with Israel." And I thought, this is what I want to tell you. And let's start looking on Israel as a different entity to how it's perceived right now. And let's understand. The Jews were wandering through Egypt as slaves. They were slaves. They weren't wandering. They were slaves. And they escaped slavery. The big story about the Exodus. As far as we know, the Exodus did happen. Maybe it didn't happen in the way that we're told. But as far as we know, a tribe that called themselves the Israelites made themselves into Israel and killed a lot of the people that were there. They did. They killed the Canaanites. That's apparently the Canaanites were cannibals and were awful people, but the Israelites did actually slay them and took over Israel themselves. They would say that it was the word of God, and that's obviously what is referred to nowadays. Anyway, the Jews were there. They were exiled before the temple was destroyed. They built a temple to service God. And again, there was another temple built, and that was destroyed. And the second time, another exile happened, and they were scattered throughout the world. As far as we know, this is true through archaeological digs, and historians contest that there was an ancient tribe of the Israelites. And they were scattered through the world. Let's fast forward many, many years of fighting over this land of Israel. I'm calling it Israel because that's how it's referred to today. But obviously it was many, many different names throughout the ages. And lots of tribes fought over Israel. And there's a very funny YouTube video, "This land is mine, this land is mine." And it's a cartoon, it's very clever. It shows how many times that land was fought over. Let's fast forward to the 1800s. And there are Jews being slaughtered in lots of lands. Russia, Europe, pogroms that you might have heard of. And the Ottomans at that time were, well, they were in command of Israel. and Jews moved back there. Now, it is said in the history books that there were Jews there. Some Jews never left, but they were small in number. So around the 1880s, it's said that there were thousands of Jews in Jerusalem, but no other Jews anywhere else in the land, pretty much. Jews started moving back there because they heard the Ottomans weren't too bad, and they were being slaughtered in their lands. They weren't welcome. In the history books that I've read, being a Jew, I was pointed to the fact that Jews have never ever been in a land before for more than 500 years. Okay? 500 years. So the story goes, okay, the anti-Semites and whoever, the haters, would say, well, what did they do? What did they do to not be able to last in the land for more than 500 years? I'll tell you what they did. They held very, very dear the values that they'd learned back in the day, thousands of years ago. And there are arguments around the Torah and where it came from, but the fact is that the Ten Commandments is a story that is held dear to Judaism, Christianity and Islam, and is probably the bedrock of our society today even. Don't steal, don't murder, there's adultery. The thing is that whether that's something that everyone adheres to now, many of those Ten Commandments are the bedrock of our society. So a lot of the main religions don't really argue that actually happened. There was a Ten Commandments scenario. Whether it was a thunder and lightning moment or whatever happened, that's pretty much unarguable. And the Jews say that it went on in Israel. What is Israel now? They've been objected to for keeping their faith. Now, around the time of the Israelites, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, these are people that don't exist anymore. They were around that time. The ancient Egyptians. Jews live in a thousands of years history, stooped in history. They're a tribe that still exists, based on many of the same traditions that were around back then. I'm sure they've changed over time, but many traditions, which is a big argument between Jews. Okay, so Jews, this ancient peoples, this tribe, have managed to stay together after being scattered around the world. They moved because they were exiled from Israel, that land. They've now started going back because of the Ottomans. They're being a little bit lenient with the Jews. They don't mind a few Jews turning up every now and again. The Jews were leaving persecution. That persecution stepped up, and there was more and more anti-Semitism in Europe. Obviously, the culmination of that was the Hitler years. Many Jews moved to Israel. There were many Jews there already. As soon as the Jews started talking about Israel as a homeland, which started way before the Second World War, and all of this immigration was there before the Second World War, there were more and more Jews going. Herzl came up with the idea of a land for the people because he thought, this is ridiculous. I'm a Jew, and all my family have lived in Europe for generations, and they're getting persecuted. And before that, I know about other persecutions that were going on. At some point, we need a homeland, which we had thousands of years ago, but we haven't had since. We need a homeland. He was lobbying the British government. The British government were quite up for it originally. And by the time the Second World War happened, you're talking about 50 years of lobbying. Eventually, the British government went for it. The problem is while there was more immigration going into this land, the Arabs, the indigenous people of the land, who had also been there for many generations, were looking at these white people coming to their land and saying, what's going on? Why are all these Russians turning up and these Europeans? This is my land. Who the hell are these people? And they started talking to the British government. And they started saying, this is not on. These people can't move here. British government, they offered Uganda. Not sure it would have been any different sending hundreds of thousands of Jews to Uganda. Not sure. But I understand. The fact is, the Arabs were pissed off. And the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem took it upon himself to start uprisings. There were many uprisings before that, because Jews went there and they set up communities. And they started farming the land. And the land, a lot of it was pretty rubbish. I mean, there was mosquitoes, there were swamps. And the Jews started they planted eucalyptus trees actually to mop up the swamps. Eucalyptus trees are very water heavy. Mop up the swamps with eucalyptus trees. Get the land fallow. Get the land ready to grow on. You see, this is so live. I'm willing to make mistakes. Look, this is me. I've read this stuff. I'm living in Israel. I want to just communicate the fact that there's a backstory, and once you understand the backstory, you can understand what's going on. And I'm a Jew, but I'm not going to be totally pro-Israel. I want to understand the reasons behind the conflict, and then we can start looking at what's actually going on now, because Jews were moving there, Arabs were fighting them. That's the story. That's been going on since the start. The Jews have got more and more arrogant in their fighting. They've built up armies and they've said, no, you can leave us alone. Because in 1947, after the final curtain of the final solution, which, by the way, people are talking about Zionists and gas chambers being made up. It's not made up. If you're a reasonable person, you understand that. You know, you don't make up that stuff. 6 million Jews dying, you don't make it up. It was happening. It's real. There's so much evidence that is hard evidence. There are still people alive that suffered that, but not for long, which plays into the hands of the people that say it wasn't as it was. Obviously, it was such a horror that you can't imagine something like that happening. But it happened. It happened. I've heard first-hand stories since I've been a young kid about this stuff. These people are not lying. They're people. They saw this stuff. They tell you the story. Why would they make it up? It's not to try and get Jews up in positions of power. No, the Jews that are in positions of power got there because of the horror stories. They rose up and they said, never again. God, it's quite heavy, isn't it? Okay, so you've got this situation of Jews moving to Israel. The British heard the Arabs' protestations and offered, and they said, okay, we're not gonna let the Jews take the land. We'll offer you sovereignty. They actually offered sovereignty to the Arabs, and the Jews would be citizens as long as Jews would not be second-class citizens, and it was refused. This is history. Then there was a partition plan offered. And the partition plan is similar to 48, but actually much less for the Jews. And the Jews accepted it, and the Arabs didn't. Now, listen, I know, now you're like, oh, you're so Jew-centric. The Arabs in these lands are tribes. They're all tribes. And the British started carving up the land. And one of the things they did was give Transjordan, which was part of the same land of Palestine, to the Hashemites, who were a minority tribe. They got on well. I think they helped the British fight in the Second World War, and they offered that land to the Hashemites. I've got to have some water. This is live, by the way. It is a theory now, but probably checks out. There's quite a few people that check it out. A lot of Jordan is Palestinian, but they've absorbed themselves into Jordanian society. But many believe that King Abdullah's rule is not very strong, and that the majority Palestinian population aren't that up for King Abdullah and his father, King Hussein. But they soldier on. The thing that I find remarkably sinister out of all of this situation, and I'm not going to excuse the fact that Israel nowadays is very hardline, and they've got a massive army, and they totally outnumber the Palestinians, and they subjugate the Palestinians, and they do whatever they can do to control that Palestinian peoples. But so do all the Arab countries surrounding them. And the Arab countries use the Palestinian cause to unite their people against their despot leaderships, for their despot leaderships. So they treat their people remarkably bad. The people are totally in their hands because they have a common cause. And the common cause is the Palestinian and Israeli conflict. And it's very easy to align the Israeli government with the US and Britain and the West. And there you have a very clear division between the West and the East. And you can say that the US and England have their own enclave in the Middle East. And let's actually look at the leaderships of the Middle East. Like, actually look at them. Look at the histories. Iran have installed Rouhani as a prime minister, but their leadership is still a theocracy. And anyone that disobeys that theocracy gets their hand chopped off. If you want to be gay in Iran, forget about it. You're going to get arrested or killed. If you want to be gay in any of the Arab territories, forget about it. You're going to be killed. Tel Aviv, Israel, you won't. You can go and hold your hands. Gays flock to Tel Aviv for holidays. Now, I'm not saying Israel's great because it lets gays walk the street. No. I'm just saying the people, the very people that are championing the causes of the Middle East in London, UK, New York, USA, are exactly the people that stand up for gay rights. And yet, in those territories, you're dead. Okay, it's fine, you know, they hold different standards. If you want to go there, you need to abide by their state. I absolutely agree. But what kind of leadership leads their people like that? What kind of leadership hangs people on a day-to-day basis? The kind of leadership, I think, that need to unite their people, who often are in poverty, except for Saudi Arabia, they're feeding off their oil. A lot of their people are very rich. But their population that build stuff and do things are immigrants, Indians. Indians are massive immigrants across the Middle East, and they get treated massively bad. They haven't got passports. The passports are kept by the government. They build the houses. They do the menial jobs that no one else is prepared to do. They are subjugated. Palestinians are subjugated as well. What I'm saying is, these are the kind of leaders you're dealing with. And by the way, you've got the Shia and Sunni against each other. So you've got Iran and Syria backing, Iran's backing Syria, who non-religious leadership apparently, but Iran backed them anyway. You've got Hezbollah in Lebanon, who are a massive force in Lebanon. So they unite as Shias. Then you've got Saudi Arabia as Sunnis. You've got ISIS as Sunnis, which is probably somewhere along the line funded from the Saudis. You've got these two opposing tribes that are, and obviously you have those in every other countries in the Middle East where you've got Shias and Sunnis in the same country and they're fighting each other. What's the one thing that will unite these people? Israel. Israel is the colonialist white rule that came to this land to take over the Middle East. The next thing they're going to do is blow up the Al-Aqsa Mosque. These things are very present at the moment, and Israel is being used as a scapegoat. Hundreds of thousands of people have been killed in Syria. Hundreds of thousands. There were four protests in England over Syria this year, 2015. 41 protests in England have been against Israeli rule and free Palestine. There's such an imbalance there. What I'm going to be doing in these podcasts is just talking about the day-to-day news that doesn't get reported in the British press. I'm not going to be absolutely pro-Israel all the time. I'm not a massive fan of Netanyahu. I don't think that a lot of things that Israel do are correct and the right way to behave. But I'm also very concerned that the country in the Middle East, that, by the way, did you know this? Israel is about 8,022 square miles of land, and Wales is about 8,000 square miles. If tomorrow someone stood up and started shouting the cause for the South Wales Massive, let's annex South Wales from North Wales, because the North Wales people were a bit richer and the South Wales people are very, very poor, and they keep trying to rob the houses of the North Wales people, and they don't really get along. And actually, who the hell are the North Wales people, because they've all made money elsewhere and there's richer cities, and the South Wales people are really poor, and actually there's massive discrimination. And so what we're going to do is annex South Wales from North Wales. How ridiculous is that? It's a tiny place. How does that work? Well, the thing that I think is that the agenda of the Middle East is being pushed by the West. And the reason why it's been pushed by the West, we've bought into the idea that Israel is a demon. It's the worst thing on earth. It should be destroyed. And why do we think like that? I think it's got something to do with the fact that the Arab states need a cause to unite them, and they have been pushing that cause through public relations all over the world, and they control the game because they have the oil, and if the West don't play ball, they don't get oil, and this cause becomes number one, even though it's a country the size of Wales and there's lots of other stuff going on. And I think it's a bit sinister. I really, really think that the Palestinians are treated so badly by those Arab countries. If you're a Palestinian in Syria, Jordan, Egypt, you get treated like a second or third or fourth class citizen. you get treated terribly. But no one talks about that. People talk about the fact that Israel are subjugating the Palestinians. The other thing is that I think that the Palestinians, from what I've seen, by the way, I've been there 9 months, I've seen some Palestinian textbooks, and they're getting told that every ill that is going on in their world is to do with Israel. And I'm just not sure about it. And I think that although, look, I think the Palestinians are treated really, really terribly. But I think that there is some responsibility that needs to be taken by the British, the Israelis, and the Arab states. And if we could have imagine this. I know it's going on. God, I'm going to have another drink of water because it's going on. This is a rant, but this is how I feel, and this is I don't hear this being expressed anywhere. Look, if you're going to have a separate state, then build a border. So the Israelis built a wall because the Palestinians want a separate state. So they built a wall. But suddenly it's an apartheid wall. It wasn't an apartheid wall. It was to stop suicide bombers coming into Israel and blowing up buses. And do you know what? It worked. It actually worked. There aren't that many suicide bombings anymore. In fact, probably none. So that's a border. They've got no airport. They've got no economy. They're absolutely on their knees. But the Palestinian Authority have been gaining money in aid for years and years and years, and millions and millions and billions of pounds. And where's it gone? Where's it gone? They've built up Ramallah. They've built up certain cities. But they're not using that money to build an economy. By the way, Tony Blair, who you hate, I think he shouldn't have invaded Iraq, for sure. It was a very bad call. He encouraged a mobile network to be brought into Palestine. They have their own mobile network now. He was talking about building the economy of Palestine. And lots of Palestinian ministers have been said to, they've documented that they've talked about building up an economy in Palestine where it becomes a separate economic state, which is perfectly possible in today's system that's there. They can do that. But it hasn't happened. It has. I mean, there's hotels, there's cafes. You know, if you go to the big Palestinian cities, there are. And by the way, Israelis can't go there. It's too dangerous. They'll get killed. They're not allowed there. And those cities are run by the Palestinian Authority. And they have their own police forces. They have their own systems. The army don't go into a lot of those places. They go into shared places. Yes, they do go into certain places where they feel that there's a threat. Look, this has built up into massive paranoia from both sides. The fact is that the leaders are corrupt. I don't think that the Israeli leaders are any less corrupt than the Palestinian leaders. Ismail Haniyeh from Hamas lives in a hotel in Qatar. He cares so much about his people and the plight they're in that he lives in Qatar. Oh, he's scared of being blown up by the Mossad or chased down by the Mossad. Is that a freedom fighter? I don't know. He's living in a 5-star, 7-star hotel in Qatar. Mahmoud Abbas wrote his university dissertation in university in Russia, where he went, on the fact that the Zionists have made up the Holocaust and that only about 800,000 people died. He wrote that in his dissertation. these people, I don't think they believe in peace. I think that the Arabs will not stop until Jews leave Israel, because it was Arab land. And fair game to them, to those people, because it was for a long time. And there are generations and generations that lived there before massive Jewish immigration. Fair game to the Jews. They were fleeing persecution. So, who's right? They're both right. They're both right. The problem in this is that there's zero people power, because the Jews are teaching their children, the Israelis are teaching their children that the Arabs want to destroy them, and the Palestinians are teaching their children that the Israelis want to destroy them and that they shouldn't be in their land because this is their land from before. And I think what I want to see in the media is that kind of balance, rather than Israel is the oppressor. Because the fact is that ever since Jews and Jews started landing in Palestine, Arabs have attacked them. This has been going on for 70 years. Of course, there's a cycle, and it's got bigger and bigger and bigger, but it doesn't stop the problem. It's not Israel's evil. There are now millions and millions of Jews living in this land, and the Arabs don't want them there, and they will do anything they can to get them out of this land. And the problem that we face is the reality of now, which is there are millions of Jews there and there are millions of Arabs there, and we need to make it work. Neither can be turfed out. It's too long. We've got established states there, and we need to make it work. But we need trust. And the way that I think the trust comes is to stop teaching our children hate and start teaching them love. And that's a massive problem, because what we need is the world on board. And at the moment, what I see, and I've raised this as a Jew, is that I'm really concerned that Israel is being viewed as the oppressor and Palestinians are being viewed as the victim. And that is the story. It's a very simple soundbite. Free Palestine. BDS, boycott Israel. Let's be haters. Let's like, the positive message is free Palestine, but come on. What does that mean? What? That means carving up a country that's the size of Wales to free Palestine? No. A lot of the people in Palestine want... Excuse me for picking my nose. It's very rude on camera, isn't it? Look, the fact is that the hardliners on both sides want neither of them to be there. And the problem is it's getting more and more extreme to get rid of all of them. So what we need to do, as far as I'm concerned, is get the people to meet each other, which is not happening on a day-to-day. There are some projects that are happening. I'm going to get involved in a particular project that I'm thinking of. I really want to get involved with it. It's called Echo Me. And they're putting on events, and they're having... Area C is an area that Jews and Palestinians can go. It's in the West Bank. They're getting people to meet each other, and I feel like that's the seed. It's the very start. There are coexistence schools, but a lot of them are Israeli Arabs and Jews that are living in Israel. Israeli Arabs have similar rights to Jews, not quite. You know, there's a bit of discrepancy, and obviously there would want to be more, but they're a minority, and it's difficult. That's besides the point. The point, I think, is a positive attitude. And I really feel like this Israel slamming and this Israel's the aggressor. Like, let's change our mindset into, we have a real problem here of two peoples that are both right, and we need to help them instead of pointing out the negatives. And my 9 months there so far, and I'm going back there in a couple of weeks, has pointed out the negatives all the time. And I don't think that's a recipe for change. Let's just be reasonable. It's not a recipe for change. What we need is for the people to meet each other, and for us to think that the people, and I've met a lot of them, they're positive. The people are great. BDS, it's just messing the people. 1,000 Arabs lost their jobs when SodaStream had to move their factory. 1,000 Arabs who were Palestinians, who were earning good money. It's not right. It doesn't make any sense, BDS. Let's boycott universities that are coming up with these amazing cancer cures, mobile phone chips, all these amazing things that the world uses that were invented in Israel. Boycott the academics. They've got nothing to do with it. Most of the academics are pro-Palestinian. It makes no sense. Doesn't work. Positive is what we've got to be. Look, I'm going to go. How long have we done? 38 minutes. It's time for me to go. I'm going to be back. David Yitzchak, WeTalkIsrael.org. Spread the word. I'm going to be doing podcasts on a daily basis. I'm going to be talking about news stories that none of us hear about in the West, just to paint a picture and just to build that picture and understand what's happening, so that we can try and get on board with positive and try and change things for the better, instead of to criticise and talk about the wrongs and who's wrong and who's right. Because actually everyone's wrong at the moment, but everyone thinks they're right. And that's the problem. Okay, we're going to join you again. I'm going to join you again. There's no one else here. I'm on my own. Okay, it's a pleasure. Thank you for sticking with this. I hope you've learnt something, and I hope we can move together. We're going to open up an email address, WeTalkIsrael@gmail.com. WeTalkIsrael@gmail.com. Email me if you like this. Email me if you've got comments. You can say what you want. You can tell me I'm wrong. You can totally disregard everything I've said. Bring me new information. Tell me where I'm going wrong. Tell me if I've got it wrong. But as far as I'm concerned, the way to move forward is positive, not negative. And if you can help do that and we can build something together, I think that's the way to go. See you later. Look after yourselves.